Middle East, but much, much wider than that. He's a young man that is listened to by older men and women with great attention, and I'm glad to say he's back with us now. Richard, how do you see the situation now in the Arab world after President Putin's, rather, I was there, so I can tell you with no exaggeration that Putin took the Gulf by storm. What impact is that having in the rest of the Arab world?
Hi, George. Thanks for having me on. Well, I'll just start out by saying that when Putin visited Saudi Arabia, they posted a 6-minute video of him being greeted by MBS and other officials, which was kind of a, how should I put this politely? Well, it was a rude gesture pointed at aimed at the Americans in a sense, telling them that, look, we have other options in case you're going to fumble this with what you're doing with Israel, with this plan for a new Middle East. And of course, you know, earlier in the year when Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, they joined BRICS, they also kind of sent that message as well. The thing is that when Putin is making these snap visits to the Middle East, this is, you know, it's also the act in and of itself is a message to the rest of the world, is that, you know, as long as America is going to get bogged down in wars in Ukraine, and dragging the rest of Europe with it into supporting Ukraine and then also Israel, the rest of the world is still going to try and move on without them. You know, obviously it would be nice to see more support from the Chinese and the Russians when it comes to Palestine, but you know, this is obviously a different conversation, because were they to get involved, they would have a confrontation with the Americans, and they're already trying to deal with the Cold War and Ukraine. But you know, the funny thing is that when the Ukraine war started, they tried to vilify the Russians and sanction them, and we're seeing now, after a year and a half, almost 2 years, that this campaign has failed. The sanctions against Russia backfired. Their attempts to, you know, put an arrest warrant out on Putin didn't amount to anything. So he's still able to travel freely. And we saw that when he was actually, you know, on his way there in the presidential jet, they jammed the USS Eisenhower and it was rendered basically immobile and was irreparable for an entire day. So, you know, Putin is going to travel wherever he wants, whenever he wants, and he's not going to be bogged down by, you know, attempts by the United States, who, again, I should add, is not an ICC member, but loves messing with the ICC to put out warrants on people it doesn't like. So he's not bogged down by that. And I would add also that the head of the delegation, the Ukrainian delegation, who went to Istanbul to hash out peace talks with the Russians, confirmed what Putin had said a few months ago when he held up the draft peace agreement with Ukraine, that yes, Russia had offered peace. The only condition was neutrality, that Ukraine will forego NATO membership. And Boris Johnson, you know, our beloved former prime minister, went down there and told the Ukrainians personally not to sign anything with the Russians and to keep fighting against them, and that NATO would have their back. And we see now that this was not true. Once again, you know, this is the curse of blindly trusting the United States. You end up stabbed in the back. Many have made this mistake in the past. The Kurds, for example, got stabbed in the back by the Americans, even Saddam Hussein. So, you know, it's a very long list. And Ukraine now is not even in the news anymore. And they're slowly winding people down, saying that, well, you know, it's not winnable. And it isn't winnable, but we knew this from the start. And they could have found a diplomatic settlement, diplomatic solution in the beginning. But unfortunately, they let it go to this. And Ukraine is now 1/3 of Ukraine's territory has been mined, which is very tragic. You know, all these people that have been killed from the Russian side, from the Ukrainian side, for this needless war. But, you know, NATO are done making their money. And so now they've moved on to Israel, where they're now sending them, you know, 10,000 tons of gear. In the last 2 months, over 100 bunker buster bombs, $14 billion. This is another, you know, money laundering cycle, basically money changing hands from, you know, the taxpayer into the arms manufacturers. But Russia, China, Iran, and the global south, their standing on the world stage has improved as a result. So we're seeing a decline of the West, and people like Putin and Xi Jinping and Raisi and Bashar al-Assad, all these leaders that they've tried to malign, are just moving on without the West, and that's something that people are going to have to get used to. That we have a choice now. We can either cooperate with the rest of the world and behave normally in the international community, or continue doing what people in Washington say.